My name is Ryme Kathouda, and welcome to the 6th Street Community Center fundraiser in solidarity we stand with Syrians healing Syrians. I have organized in the United States for the last, where I've been living for 30 years, and I have done a lot of housing organizing and also a lot of independent media organizing. I made sure to put a mic where any one of you all and many others had something to say so as to amplify it for people to hear what's going on. What brought me in this country was to see how we can connect people to explain what goes on back home with our own voices. When the war broke in my homeland country in Syria, I felt compelled to go see what's going on and how we can support it. What many of you don't know is I, as a survivor of the World Trade Center collapse, like many of you, but also a survivor of the Israeli invasion in 1982 in Lebanon, I knew a lot about trauma, but also about trauma recovery. I have done a lot of various transformational training. The World Trade Center provided with therapy and recovery. I have done a lot of what is called effective communication and transformational communication so as to not come undone when stress increases. So I figured that what is really needed beyond feeding the Syrians and clothing them and helping house them is the second level, not the humanitarian emergency support that way bigger organization now whatever I can create can do, but come and see how we can support them supporting themselves. I went around the country trying to understand who in Lebanon was doing a good job at providing trauma recovery and what is called psychosocial support. And this is some of what I've documented. I've organized with some of the local people, and I'm going to take you through the journey of what we have done so far and what we need to do with your support moving forward. So in Solidarity We Stand is raising funds. This is the campaign, and building a sponsors community for Syrian refugees healing and training center in Lebanon. I'll go into why we came to this conclusion. What we have done is that we have done a community-led assessment of their needs and their capabilities. Oftentimes when a community undergoes hard conditions, people forget that you have capabilities within the community. So it's extremely important as the work that we are doing here to remember this concept of community-led assessment. It's part of what we say we're working in solidarity and not charity. The Syrian refugees in Lebanon have lost their homes, community, and country to violence. You all know that. This is some of what they are surviving with. The trauma of their houses, their history of 5,000 years and more, being to pieces, wounded, displacement, and dismantling of family, communities, and things. Remember what we went through in 9/11? Remember Katrina, Sandy refugees, Iraq veterans? Imagine what they are saying about post-traumatic stress syndrome of the veterans, and now you put that to a community who has been stable for thousands of years. Some of the Syrians have lived among their tribes for really many years and separated from other people by land. So negotiating borders is not quite what they're used to. These are Syrians waiting for food vouchers. These are some of the more traditional Syrians. The children have been separated from their parents. There are thousands of orphan children in Syria and also in the other countries, Lebanon being one of them. They've been out of school for the last 2 years, and many of them have unattended post-traumatic stress syndrome as identified by UNICEF, by the Red Cross, by the Red Crescent. These were some of the first interaction that I've had in a few of the refugee places I have been with the children. Just pay attention to their faces, pay attention to which emotions they are displaying at the interaction with the camera and with me being in not that far from them. These These are others that were by the Litani River in more rural areas. They came in and they were like, why are you taking these photos? And I said, I want to show what we're going through. I'm Syrian myself, so they unveiled from what they had put around to not be shot on camera, and they accepted to be here, to be witness to what goes on. And I said, it's really important to show how many children are in these predicaments. At this point, they are a third of the Lebanese community, which means out of every 3 people in Lebanon, 1 is Syrian. It's driving the Lebanese very worried. They're impoverished professionals, experts like all of us in this room, sometimes living 5 per room, and often having left without their computers, without their degrees, without anything that proves to the world but their tongue that they're educated. And often their language is just Arabic. They live also in ad hoc tenement, that's the second layers of Syrians. In abandoned prisons, this is a prison in the Bekaa Valley. It has 127 refugees. In abandoned schools, this is in Hartanami, south of Beirut. And in what is called tented settlements. Notice the garbage. The community is so traumatized that it cannot really take care of its own, and the municipalities in all their areas are overwhelmed. What happens is somebody knows somebody who worked in Lebanon. So they come and then they set up next to them. Sometimes the municipality gave them land, or somebody donated land. Sometimes they're renting it. And then they build these shacks or these tents that are make-do. Many of them thought they're just going to be out for a month or a couple of months. Here they are 2.5 years, 3 years sometimes, out of the country. And they're starting to overwhelm the hosting community on many layers. I've done recently an article that will be published actually at the Henrik Bol Foundation's website in a magazine also called Perspectives. And I got to interview many Lebanese and particularly municipalities. They said in the beginning, we welcome them. I mean, we love the Syrians, but at this point, we're really overwhelmed by what's going on and how long they've been here. Not just the infrastructure in Lebanon can barely bear all of what's flooding out of these hundreds of thousands, I mean actually tens of thousands of Syrians. And the Lebanese don't understand why they're not cleaner than that. They don't understand that they're going through trauma, they're barely functional oftentimes. And also socially, the Syrian women and young girls are not asking for much to be wedded. Their parents are so scared from the proximity of all these strangers that they are trying to wed them to nice Lebanese. So the Lebanese women are left unwedded, and this is part of the tension. The tension has reached such points that this happened Sunday, where this tenement got burned. More than 100 tents, 400 refugees are now homeless again. What we have done is we've organized Syrian and Palestinian Syrian experts in trauma recovery and psychosocial interventions. We provided executive support and collaborated with other organizations. We've assessed the refugee needs and capabilities, and we started some community support programs. I'll tell you more about them, but for a minute I'm going to explain why we have so many Palestinian Syrians with us. It's because a lot of the psychosocial interventions and trauma recovery happens in the Palestinian camps. So some of these people have been doing it for 25 years. Now they're just extending their services to all the refugees in Lebanon. We formed Fariq Beirut, so you can get much more information in fariqbeirut.net. It's made of psychologists, experts, artists, youth counselors, graphic designers, a lot of different skills, all of them refugees as well, except for me, who is Syrian, by the way, and grew up in Lebanon, which is why I thought my presence down there now will make a difference. This is what I mean by psychosocial interventions. We do music and art therapy and psychodrama, and these are used to allow the Syrian refugees to express their emotions and release. We do talking circles, like I learned with the Native Americans, whether women alone, men alone, different ages, or everybody together, to kind of talk about what's going on in a safe space. We do training in problem solving, conflict resolution, because like I said, many of these people didn't have to negotiate borders, garbage, water, children, all sorts of details of daily life with neighbors they don't know. We do, for the more extreme one-on-one sessions, we do rape support building, because actually rape has been and is a weapon of war in the war in Syria, sometimes whole neighborhoods, men or women, so it's part of what needs to happen. We do activities that dialogue with the host community, training in networking and communication, leadership development, good neighbors, community organizing. But we also do leadership training that of the person to build one's power to plan, follow through and follow up. You'll ask me, why do we need to work so much on planning? Many of the Syrians come from an agrarian background, which means that they know very well how to plan, getting the seeds, planting the seeds, and for the rest, they depend on the weather. They irrigate some, but really it's a whole different mindset than to be in a commercial country like Lebanon, where you have to keep going for your dollar. It's not that because you just asked for a job today that it's going to come tomorrow. You got to keep hitting the doors and interacting. So it's a very big part of what people need to adapt to the new place, is to learn this planning. We also provide for the expert refugees and for the young Syrians that are trying to heal and help the less fortunate, professional development, and again executive support, legal support, writing of their projects, writing of grants. We did a few case studies. One of them was called Bread and Salt Campaign, خبز وملح, to ease the effect of having so many. What we did is many different activities, and I'll go through them. We supported also a team called Warid Team in psychosocial support, and we also, it provided the chance for our team to do field work and to do team evaluation. Because, you know, for me to understand, and then later after we formed Fariq Beirut, for all of us to know our skills compared to each other, we needed to be on the ground. And so this is what we have done. The design is done by one of the Syrian refugees. So this is a banner we provided for them. We networked with Lebanese businesses that had made their money in 2006 when Israel invaded Lebanon. They made their money in Syria, so they were willing to donate the printing of this. We did communication training. I went to Tripoli, to Beirut, and also to the south. We helped some of the Syrians. This is Ashraf Hafni, the head of the Ward team, how to talk to the media, and we got on Sky News and on a lot of other media morning shows to talk about what we're trying to do. We did a team building by providing 27 volunteers to feed the fasting in Ramadan. This is a custom in Lebanon where you feed the less fortunate. So in this particular day, there were more than 450 poor people, not just Syrians, a whole lot of Lebanese. So we supported the serving of the food and also playing with the kids. And then we went south, to South Lebanon, to build coalitions. So these are all from different backgrounds, and some of them are Lebanese, but the majority is Syrian and Palestinian Syrian. We worked with Lebanese orphans, with the Sweater and Wheat Relief Association, and people with special needs. Because with the bombing, there will be a lot of people in Syria, like there is now in South Lebanon, that are people with special need, whether because they were wounded, maimed, or because they were an infant in their mother's when she was scared, so then they are born with different dysfunctionality, physical or mental or psychological or emotional. So it was very important to expose the team that we are forming to working with people with special need. 18 Syrian refugees and a photographer came down. These are some of the activities. That's Icebreaker, you're on camera, which provides to every person a chance to be the star, but also the chance to be looking at what is going on from behind a camera, something I have used a lot with People's Media Center projects and programs in the United States. We did psychodrama. This is one of the psychologists, Mutwalli Abu Nasser, who's leading that one with SOS Village Children. We worked with Maruf Saad. We did a lot of physical therapy because of the stress and the trauma, people are very stiff, and especially that some of them haven't left the settlements they're in 8 months. Some of the children didn't have a chance to play outside. Some of the men hadn't left in 8 months, but 3 times. And it's really hard to understand why. Part of it is, like we said, trauma. Other is that the community outside treats them as beggars, aren't necessarily welcoming them. We did art therapy, whether it's tactile, whether it's painting, or whether it's music and dancing. And we worked with the people with special needs of Al Amal Institute for the Disabled in the river. Water is amazing, serving them food and working one-on-one with them. And we also provided the chance to the team to be for 48 hours in the country. So we healed the healers in a way, and it was really wonderful to have the time to clown around. Then we formed a program's delivery team of all the various experts. We have psychologists that work with autism and special needs, doctors of dentistry, teachers, sociologists, psychologists, sports coaches, and others. And these are some of their experiences. And we start, it's called Rising into the Light, طالعين على الضوء. That's the name they chose for themselves. And we focused also on working in this abandoned school that I had showed you before. We offer all these various possibilities, emotional relief and coping tools in harmony with host communities, problem solving, conflict resolution, community building, community grounding, individual healing, and leadership development. I'll go into how we actually flexed all of that. This space is an abandoned school that's now a shelter for 266 refugees, 53 households. The households are often have at least one woman in them, more often than not one man, if not a little more. And it's not necessarily father, mother, and the others. You have the elders, the in-laws, the neighbors, the children, and all the children of the neighbors and others that you picked up along the way. So some household can have up to 10 children. And we worked also, we chose this because there is a young men's coordinating committee that had taken it upon themselves to bust the chains of the abandoned school open and to host the Syrian refugees. And when the equivalent of the FBI and the police and the special securities came at them, they said, you'll have to kill us to close this school. It makes no sense for Syrian refugees to be in the streets of our neighborhood while a school in very good shape is abandoned. So the security forces in Lebanon told them that they'll be responsible for this. So they have van drivers, daily workers, Lebanese, have been watching over the school for 9 months now. Needless to say, they are more than exhausted, which is part of why I started supporting them in providing more psychosocial support for the community so they can take care of themselves. Because with the coming of the summer, the children would fight, the parents would fight, and it would become a big thing that will get the cops to the place, among other things. So the priorities were housing, trauma, and kids out of school. I compared these priorities of this one case study with evaluations that have happened all over Lebanon. It's pretty much the same. They started being in tents, and so we started building these cabins that you see in the back. Now there is no more tents, no more cardboard walls, it's wood. And we started interacting with the children. You also see some of their trauma in their eyes here. We will go into various activities and then you'll see the same kids with completely different expressions as we move on. We tallied the children. There are 106 that are between the age of 4 and 19 and 27 between 4 and 6 and 17 females and males that are teenagers. We built capacity and talked with the community about what we're trying to do, and also worked with the Lebanese. And we supported the Lebanese community, you know, charting the chores of all the various inhabitants, so there was a little more harmony in the place. We brought in artists, and Ashraf El-Shawli, Ziyad, and Jamal played music. It was the first party they've had in 9 months, in September. And you notice that the children reacted and were very open. We had done a few psychosocial interventions with the children before, and the women were next because I talked with them one-on-one. The men were very reserved, and the teenage young men were kind of on the lookout. We did a talent show that very same evening, and that's when the community really warmed up, and the children amazed their own parents with what they could do. We took them out for an evaluation with the help of another organization, And here you see them on the bus and with some of the activities. We did more serious evaluation of them by telling stories, and every activities, by the way, trains some of the teenagers in themselves becoming youth counselors. So you see here a young woman training with another. We circled and talked with the teenagers. We allowed them to play around, and through chanting and through role playing to kind of express a bit what they've gone through. We did another activity near them. Here it says, be merry, sing and play with us. We're coming into the light. We're rising to light. Can you go back up one? Yeah, go down. Thanks. We did again some more physical work and discussion, and deeper work with the psychologists, with the teenage girls, and also specialized work with the toddlers. And this is what we found out. Syria's refugees are very receptive to community-led interventions, but they have to be community-led. They had to make sure I'm Syrian myself. They said they don't need no foreigners coming and telling them what to do. It's enough that they have plenty of them in their homeland now. We found that the Syrian and the regional psychology experts can train others, and eager community teams need executive support and formal psychosocial training. But once supported, the Syrians can set up themselves to help their own refugees. They show resilience, resourcefulness, and creativity once we support them emotionally. Music and drama therapy works with them. The children are very eager to learn, but not all the parents want to put their children in school. You have almost half of them that want to make sure the children come back with them to Syria to work the land. So this is something that will be very hard to negotiate. It happens in a lot of agrarian communities. Of course, we also need, like everywhere else, effective communication, problem solving, and conflict resolution for the Syrians, but also for the Lebanese nearby. At this point, I went to Europe, and with friends of friends, we need a few of these fundraisers, and we raised like $4,000 that allowed us to support them in school. I'm going to go into one of the circles that I didn't photograph, which is the women's circle. We went through documenting what they've been through, some of their health issues, if any domestic violence is increasing, and I went in and talked about how it has been proven that when the circumstances are hard and people are under very tough pressure, domestic violence increases, how it's not just men beating women, but sometimes the child hitting their parents, sisters, neighbors, the daughter hitting her parents, and how it can happen, and how if the more they write on the paper without saying their names that these things are happening, the more I can bring them help. So then they said, come on, sister, the walls aren't that thick. We hear domestic violence when we see it. One woman took off her eyeglasses. She says, this is no makeup. So yes, it is here, and we will write for you to document it so you can bring help, because I talked about how it's not a matter of coming and taking the perpetrator out, how there are ways to heal both sides and explain to everybody and work with the tension so that there will be less of it, so they were more open. They said, but our priority now is to get our children in school. We are in September, so what we need is to make sure that, we were in August, to make sure that in September we can register the children. So when we raised some money in Europe, we made sure to buy them some costumes, because the Lebanese school were not accepting them to come without the proper clothing, some books, and we set up also after school training program, because in Lebanon math and the sciences are taught in English. So it was very important to help them with the foreign language, and actually this program is funded for 2 months. So it is going on, and that's a wonderful success. We also started some psychosocial conflict resolution, because a lot of the teenage girls talked about how it's really not possible to trust one another. They're too close for comfort, and there have been issues. So we played by role play and went through some of that. You see them at the end laughing with each other and drinking tea. It's part of what a lot of African and a lot of Arabs do as a circle. You talk with the elders, each comes alone, talks to the elders and to others about how they feel, that what happened. You don't respond to each other. And then you do a lot of role play, then you use some dancing, and also the younger ones, 12 years old, wanted to fight. So we gave them a safe space in front of everybody to actually wrestle and physically get into it. And then they talked about it, and then things were much better. So it is from the community. Now look at these photos. These photos were taken towards the end of our assessment interventions. Look how much more relaxed are the children. Look at the rapport they're making with the camera, and now with you, because they're looking at you. This is what we're trying to do. Help them cope, study, be empowered and enabled for a better tomorrow. And what we need is to have a stable, sustained organization and a training center. This is why we're raising funds at this point, because it was fine to rely on volunteer help and just pay for the gas and have somebody drive us here and somebody do that for us there. We really need to be able to be there 2-3 times a week to really go through it and move on from one settlement to another. We need to develop an international community of individual sponsors so as to be able to have a bit of our own and have our minute operating costs be independent of any external funding. And then we will have enough credibility to attract more and to also attract volunteers and other organizations. And this is what this is about. So these are some numbers. In solidarity, let's open a center in which we can have all these activities happen, but also train other people more formally in psychosocial intervention, not just like a lot of international organizations that teach them how to do activities, but explain to the young Syrians and Palestinian Syrians who are willing to do that for others why this works. The support needed is portable equipment. We need a couple of editing computers and laptops to be able to Skype training also with bigger experts. To set up the administrative center, we're talking about mats, tables, chairs, is $1,700. And per month to pay all these people, 5 part-time workers, 2 facilitators and 10 trainees is just $6,228 a month. In more details, it would allow us to pay for space rent, utilities, and the executive and 2 program directors, a psychologist on call, technical expert to administer the space and document the project, and a little stipend for 10 trainees. So $39,000 will cover 6 months. After that, I'm pretty sure we can leverage it for more. So this is why we're here. This is one photo that was shot in South Lebanon in Arnoun, where we have Lebanese of special need and Lebanese of different ages and children of the village all integrated together. Because it's very important to be able to do integrated programs so as to build for a civil society. Today, there are some in Turkey, a lot of Muslim organizations doing supposedly psychosocial interventions, but it's also a little bit of more getting into making sure everybody follows the same way of living, and it's not as secular as what you need to maintain a secular community. And also, it's not very comprehensive or formal in a sense that there is no follow-up necessarily, and it's ad hoc. We really need to be able to have a bit of our own to showcase best practices. Some people at the American University of Beirut were interested in working with us. There are others. God loves the child who's got his own, says the song. So it's very important that we're able to do that. Community support was welcome. These are the information. The check would be written to the Alliance for Global Justice /PMC/FB, and online you can do donations for fariqbeirut.net. It's some of the girls, like one time when we took them on the outing and they were coming back, they were also rowdy on the bus, and I was like really led into them. It's like, chill, everybody back in the camp didn't have your chance. I really need you. I mean, I really let them have it. And then I went to pick up something from my bag, and I felt something on my cheek, and I looked. Every single one of the 78 kids gave me a kiss and says, "This was great. Next time you take the parents." This is part of what I'm talking about, resilience. The bouncing back happens very fast. I had a community center in Washington, D.C. It was like trying to hold sand in my hand. If you're not with them every day, it sips through. With the Syrians, because before these 3 years, they have been in a stable community for a long time, they bounce back. So it's a really worthy investment. It's also very important to kind of teach skills of building a community, of talking with somebody you don't agree with somebody you don't know, so that today they can survive in Lebanon and we don't have more burnt tenements, so that they can themselves pick up their garbage, negotiate the sewage, help with their skills the community who has hosted them. But it's also so they can rebuild in Syria. Because short of that, it's really, they won't survive as a community. There is 1.5 million Syrians in Lebanon. So that's a lot of people. And you will say, how will you reach all of these? We will train people who are reaching all of these, but we'll train them to be more efficient in their methodology. We will extract best practices, some of which we started doing now, so that the work is really maximized. The return on investment, something New Yorkers know a lot about. Another layer of intervention is every Saturday we do an open house where we cook a big meal and we open the house of my cousin and his wife to a lot of Syrian refugees and Palestinian Syrians, and we try to networking, and we also do release and discussion. And one time I was doing a discussion with the group, 3 people that have been in prison, and they were going through how all they had was really like 2 foot square. If they got too tired and they felt, sometimes 6 to 7 people in the morning will be taken out of the cell dead, squished by somebody heavier, because everybody got too tired and then you couldn't move them. And one young man said that he had to remember, and then he decided to talk about all of what he knows of Syrians' resilience and history and survival. And he was a very well-educated young man in history. So he started talking about that and eventually found a way to kind of like Shahrazad, tell a bit of the story and then tell them he'll tell it more later. And so that people had the patience to listen to him. He told me what they had to do was to hold him, carry him, so that he can be put in the other corner so he can talk to the other people in the jail cell, and on, and help everybody survive. And he said the less educated people were, the harder it was for them to imagine a future different than what they're living here and now. So to be able to stop the war in Syria and stop the people that are taking money from the outside, is you have to stop supporting the war machine, stop selling weapons, stop governments wanting to do interventions. That's really important. So get people to talk, and at the table, they will get themselves. It's just everybody tell their government hands off, and it's a lot of different governments. There is also within the government and within the regime people that have a huge loyalty to Syria. There are people who don't care and are very alienated from the others, and it's like this in every faction. What I didn't say is that these 3 young people that have been in prison were in actually 3 different prisons. There are Alawi families, for example, where the teenage boy was held by al-Nusra and killed for being Alawi. The middle brother is put in jail by the government because they participated in setting up committees to heal the wounded and transport medication. And the father is a general or a colonel in the army, but an MD doctor who is in hospital arrest for refusing to not heal the wounded that were from any faction. There are people who have one sibling taken by one party in jail and another by another. There's a lot of family that are breaking on loyalties, so it's not really which sect you belong to or which religion you belong to, it's rather what you believe in or where you happen to be. Also, young people are drafted. So if you happen to be young and you're in the neighborhood, you don't have a choice but to take arms. And everybody in Syria has been trained, because for the presence of Israel nearby, it's part of what people undergo, is military training in the schools. So the question of, well, how come people can just take weapons, is they are trained to take weapons. On the other hand, it's not what they like to do, so you can regress that very fast and return to a civil society. But it's also important to give people a future of what this would look like, to expose them to people from other backgrounds, to expose them to things that worked. So it's part of why we need media equipment, so that we can shoot discussion and take them somewhere else and show movies from the region about how people recovered. One of the most hopeful things that I heard is in one of my interviews that I did in the south. There was an older woman, all dressed in black, from a region that was occupied by Israel till 2001. It's called Kafar Ramman, which means the little village of the pomegranate. And she said, you know, don't lose hope. Remember how much we worried in Lebanon 16, 17 years? In our village, we were picking up warriors that didn't even speak Arabic, that didn't look anything like us. They came from all sorts of countries. But within a week, the war stopped. People decided to sit at the table and finish it all. So there is this hope, and we need to kind of pass this hope to the people that are outside the country, because it's part of why they're crumbling now. And the men more than the women. Because when the man cannot go do what he's used to doing and provide for the family and take care of their safety, he feels useless. The women are in a little better shape, and the children are also more receptive. And Syria is a country that has 60 to 70% youth. So working with the youth is huge. And it's part of what we are providing as expertise in working with teenagers. A lot of it I drew from working with Awam, actually. Arab women active in arts and media in solidarity. One thing, which is why we need these computers that we can do, is Skype, group-to-group conversations and sharing. And I'm actually trained also in simultaneous and consecutive interpreting, so I can interpret very smoothly between two languages. So these are things we can do.
One of the other things that's most important about the work you're doing is that it's community-based. And because so many of us want to donate to Syria to help the Syrians, but we don't know how to get our money there without it being filtered through an American Red Cross or Red Crescent or something like that. So I think that's a really strong point to people who are already wanting to give, but they just want to know where it's going to do the most good. And I just applaud you for all your hard work.
And I just want to say something about giving to something like this is more direct. We're giving via something like the Red Cross, via India.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and we are committed to updating people on the evolution, the various programs, the various things we're doing, and also on having transparent financing. So this is how we're spending the money. It's not 70 to 80% overhead, bureaucratic. We're not writing 6,000 reports. We're telling you this is how we spend it.